So do I. It's true. A couple people have asked me why so many of my summertime sermons in the newsletter say TBD, to be determined. And I've said, somewhat jokingly, well, I'm tired. Because it's summertime. But also I think the general theme has been whatever I'm fired up about that week. And so that really is to be determined. But I just got back from seminary last week. I was there for Bible studies, which might seem a little weird for Unitarian Universalists, but we do come out of the Christian tradition. This is a big part of our history. And as liberal, progressive religious people in America today, what we're facing is the loudest religious voices coming from the Christian right. And it's important to know what the Bible says and what Jesus says. And so next week I'll be talking about the radical Jesus. Yes, Jesus as revolutionary. Jesus as standing up for the poor. Jesus combating empire. But today I want to talk about the phenomenon of individual blame in this country. We're big on individualism, and we've individualized blame for all manner of things. So late last month, this video went viral on Twitter. It was just a prank. A young woman of color took the lid off an ice cream container. Have you seen this? Yeah. A couple of you have. You'll remember it. Is at the grocery store, takes the lid off a container of ice cream, licks it. I know, it was very gross. Puts the lid back on and puts it back in the case, and she and her friends are laughing. And so this went viral because everyone online was grossed out. And you can imagine that could be my ice cream tub. You never know. And so we could argue about whether or not this prank was truly harmless, right? Truly harmless. But in the grand scheme of things, it seemed to me worthy of, at most an eye roll and a stern talking to from some elders, right? Like if you saw your grandkid on Twitter or Instagram doing that, you'd be like, what is wrong with... Oh my gosh. But authorities in Texas felt differently. And within an hour, they had sprung into action, announcing that she could be charged with up to 20 years in prison. For tampering with a consumer product, they put out, they started a massive search. The governor of Texas called this person, quote, a despicable criminal. And when she was found, applauded the police for their vigilance and skill in tracking this criminal down. Now, the purpose of this sermon, by the way, she turned out to be 17. She's a kid. That's the sort of thing kids do. Dumb, yes, but worthy of 2 decades of imprisonment, maybe in Texas. But the purpose of this sermon is not to discuss the endemic overreactions of American law enforcement, which are well documented almost to the point of not even needing a sermon anymore, and yet we do. These overreactions of American policing are partially responsible for us being the most imprisoned country in the world. Now, 1 in 4 Americans has a criminal record. And this is in terms of percentage and sheer numbers. If you're imprisoned anywhere in the world, like if you're in confinement on planet Earth, the chances are, and this is not a figure of speech, the chances are you're an American. You're not in North Korea. You're not in Somalia, you're here. And the chances are you didn't even hurt another person. But no, the purpose of this sermon is to consider why it was not considered a crime when that same ice cream company, Bluebell Ice Cream, the tub that she licked, why it was not considered a crime when 3 people died after eating Bluebell ice cream tainted with listeria, after years of that company's poor sanitation practices have been documented by the FDA and the CDC, after having had prior listeria outbreaks that sickened many people. Why, after they continued to cut corners, and 3 people died, that was not a crime. But licking the tub of ice cream is. A kid who licks a single tub of ice cream in this country as a joke can have the full force of Texas law enforcement brought down around them and threatened with having their freedom taken away, put in a cage. But a company can kill people through willful negligence, and, well, the USDA's hands are tied. These things happen. To all of our credit, and I do mean all of us, stories like the ice cream licking incident are really easy to understand. They're easy to judge because, like you heard today, when there's a story, you knock over the teddy bear, the eye falls off. You've got characters, and we seek to make meaning through cause and effect. We're much more emotionally compelled by stories when there's a name and a face. It's not as intriguing or compelling when a company, I don't know, just doesn't scald its stainless steel equipment at the right temperatures, right? Those Excel spreadsheets of sanitation data are not as compelling as the fairy tales we make for ourselves about our fellow citizens. But I think as religious people, it's important for us to be aware of those biases, of those tendencies in ourselves to judge. Because those biases affect not just our judgment in general, but our judgment of our fellow human beings. As Unitarian Universalists, in particular, our principles call us to alleviate human suffering, to build a more just world where more of us can be free, and I mean that in a very literal sense, especially in this country. To create the kind of culture where we're not imprisoning large numbers of our fellow citizens basically just for existing. That's our work. But it's much easier to do our work, as it were, on a one-on-one basis where we're just calling each other out for minor verbal infractions for saying something insensitive, and we pat ourselves on the back. And that work is important, especially in the case of microaggressions, but that is easier, make no mistake, than turning our collective attention to a company, a corporation, an institution, a whole segment of society doing something evil. So here's another example, and I like to give you examples from the snail keeping community. I keep pet snails, as some of you know. Precisely because it's so far removed from what most of us would think of as even remotely important. And yet, the dramas that play out are a fantastic replica of every other faction of society. It's just a microcosm of humanity. So, I get regular reminders from the Snail Fans USA forum not to advertise interstate snail trades. You may not, I don't care how well-meaning you are, you may not send the cutest of your snails to your friend in Ohio. Because moving snails out of state is a federal crime. And the group, so this has become shunned. It is culturally not done in snailing circles. You don't talk about it, you don't do it, because the USDA will shut your group down. So anyone who even mentions it, hi, I'm in Arizona, it's very dry, I just need one snail to love, banned. Banned. Because, and this is true, the USDA openly monitors snailing forums. It's openly, like Agent Smith has joined the group. Well, they don't even make a secret about it. Ship a snail, go to jail. Yeah, do you know why? So it turns out that invasive snails, and in this country most of them are a huge threat to agriculture and human health. Rat lungworm disease, it will kill you, right? And right now, the giant African land snail is slowly munching its way through Florida. Yeah, it's a big deal. So, ship a snail, you'll go to jail. They come down really hard on individuals who, and you know, there's pictures online of people's suitcases being broken open at the airport. It's true. So hold that, the massive amount of responsibility a person can incur. In contrast, staying in the realm of agricultural dangers, Monsanto. Oh, that sound warms my heart. Monsanto, one of the biggest agriculture companies in our country and the world, since 1901, has been poisoning entire towns of people around the world. They get away with it more elsewhere. Manufacturing DDT and Agent Orange, dumping mercury and PCBs into human drinking water, racking up over 40 Superfund sites that they have not remediated, patenting seeds and then suing small farmers for replanting those seeds to drive them out of business, and generally living up to the nickname, the most evil company on earth. I did not make that up. Like Monsanto, if they could get away with it, they would have stuffed a teaspoonful of depleted uranium under every snail shell in America to hide it. And they have faced almost no legal repercussions until a couple years ago. So you as an individual, you yourself can sell one Achatina filica, widely acknowledged to be the cutest and most lovable pet snail. One Achatina filica to the wrong address, and the USDA will send a SWAT team to kick down your door in the dead of night in the name of agriculture and all that is holy. But a company can systematically carry out what appears to be the agricultural work of Satan for over a century, and the USDA's hands are tied. Of course, I'm just kidding. I don't believe in Satan, but Monsanto is evil. Or at least they do perpetually evil things. And by evil I mean willfully imposing unnecessary suffering out of selfishness or callous disregard for life. You don't have to be malicious to carry out evil. Sometimes it's just for profit. Often it is. And don't get me wrong, I don't just hate corporations across the board as a general prejudice. I appreciate and benefit from modern life, our comfort and health and safety, a lot of which has come from big companies with big resources to carry out research. I myself have benefited from cutting-edge medicines that have come from, brace yourselves, big pharma. Right? Right? And don't get me wrong. I'm not just generally against corporations. What I am against, what I don't appreciate, is our societal and governmental bias against holding corporations accountable. They can have all the political clout of individuals, but not be held accountable when they do things like jack up the price of insulin and EpiPens to the point that people die because it's more profitable. When we imprison individuals for minor infractions that basically harm nobody in order to remind ordinary citizens, especially people of color, to stay in their place or have their freedom taken. Consequences only seem to occur in our society in microcosm. And today, religion across much of America also reflects this bias. Our religions are often a study of how we get along only on the smallest of scales. How you yourself are supposed to behave day to day, how you're supposed to comport yourself, how we get along just with one another, the people around us, what people should or should not do. American Christianity in particular is often conducted this way, with an emphasis: what do you do if you want or need an abortion? Who should be allowed to marry or not? What behaviors will send you to hell? But Christianity was, in fact, started as a response to empire. It wasn't about what will send you specifically to hell. It was a response to big external forces of domination and oppression. And we will talk more about this next week. Jesus didn't just teach his followers how to conduct themselves around each other. He taught them how to conduct themselves in the face of the faceless forces controlling their lives from afar. Today, quotes like "render unto Caesar what is Caesar's," right? Pay your taxes. Those quotes from the Bible are often misused to tell people that the Bible says you should be an obedient citizen. The Bible says that you should respect the rule of law and accept the terms of your employment or subjugation. It's not true. In context, what Jesus was saying when he said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar, Caesar the emperor, he was saying not that the powers exerted over you that you have no control over, not that they're, totally legitimate. They don't have to be legitimate to still exert power. He was saying they can compel you if you don't go along with this. They are still real even if you reject them. But that doesn't mean you need to submit in your heart, and it doesn't mean you need to pretend that you're okay with it. With Caesar excessively taxing your village, with Monsanto poisoning your town because that's their right to a profit, or with police arresting all the men in your neighborhood because they broke the law. Jesus was saying that you can live your lives aware of those forces, aware that those forces are there, paying your taxes to Caesar, doing what you have to do in order to survive within that system. But you don't need to pretend that the system's okay or that you ever had a choice. Because the individual can be executed, make no mistake, but the big institution will not be. A more modern version of that saying might be, render unto Comcast what is Comcast's. Make no mistake, they will shut off your phone. They will disconnect your internet if you don't pay the bill. Do we have a choice about, I'm only going to pay for $10 of this week? Not really. They kind of have a monopoly in most of the areas they operate in. No one who lives there, if they want to exist and survive in modern, employable society, most people don't have a choice about paying their phone bill. It's true, it's pretty hard to get by. But that doesn't mean, say, Comcast's inflated price for existing in society is natural, normal, justified, or, okay? The passive consequences of a monopoly like Comcast's have a much bigger effect on society than most of us might think. If everyone in America loses an extra $20 a month because Comcast has a monopoly, that actually amounts to a massive theft of resources from entire classes of people. Massive theft. Incredible. But if you jump a subway turnstile in New York and steal a train ride for $2.75, you will be arrested. You will have your freedom deprived. You can steal $1 from a bank and go to jail much longer than a Comcast executive ever will. So we all have this bias in us that makes us view active transgressions, someone actively stealing something, or jumping a turnstile, as much more violent and serious than the passive ones. But those big passive ones have far-reaching consequences. So this is why, if someone actively chooses to vote twice or 3 times in an election, that's voter fraud. You can go to jail for that. And that's viewed in America as much more of a serious transgression than failing to properly register tens of thousands of elderly people, just neglecting to register women who are much more likely to have had name changes through marriage, failing to, set up polling places in poor neighborhoods where people of color live. Those passive transgressions are not seen as crimes. But make no mistake, one of them involves tens of thousands of cases of effective voter fraud by removing votes. And the one that actually gets penalized is negligible, but it's individual. Passive transgressions like allowing poor sanitation to continue at your ice cream factory because it's cheaper and you kill 3 people can have much bigger consequences to human life than the active, prosecutable ones like licking a tub of ice cream while laughing. So I ask you, is it okay for an individual Walmart employee to steal merchandise from their workplace? I don't know. What do you think most Americans would say? Is it okay if a Walmart employee says, I'm just going to take a TV this week? I'm sick of working here. I know what I would say, but I think most Americans would agree. It's not okay. That person should be punished. They should go to jail. But is it okay for Walmart to steal wages from that same employee? What about stealing wages from all their employees? Walmart has paid out over $1.4 billion in settlements related to stealing wages from its own workers, just neglecting to pay people for the time that they worked. And that's only the times it has both been caught, documented enough to be caught, and then held accountable, and rest assured they have not been held accountable for a fraction. So contrast that with the snail keeper that I know who's about to get arrested for shipping a snail across a state line and heavily fined. Immediate action. Walmart gets away with this every single day. No one's sending the cops to kick down Walmart's door. $1.4 billion stolen from workers? And yet numerous shoplifters over the years have been shot by private security guards and off-duty cops at Walmart for attempting to take items like diapers and milk without paying. You take a pack of diapers, you can get shot. You steal 1.4 billion people from Americans, $1.4 billion from American people, and, just roll with it. You might not get caught. The most minor individual infractions result in brutal consequences. I think most of us know this. You've probably heard that saying too many times to count, don't do the crime if you can't do the time. But I don't think stealing a gallon of milk should warrant an instant extrajudicial death sentence. And Walmart commits lots of crimes and does no time. The crime is pretty relative, and the time is not inherently fair. Is it right, I ask you, for a person to sell their food stamps for cash to use for something else? What if they need it? Or what if it's just for drugs? I think most Americans would say, no, that's not right. They should be caught. But is it right that in this country the minimum wage is less than the amount of money a person needs to survive? The minimum wage, what kind of minimum is it? That all the time, energy, and labor one human being can produce can only be traded for enough food and shelter to support half a human. Is it right for a person to sell heroin? You can go to jail for the rest of your life if you get caught with enough. You can be held responsible for murder if someone overdoses on the drugs that you sell. Is it right that 500,000 lives have been lost to the opioid crisis? So many that almost everyone in this room has lost someone they love or they know someone who has. While pharmaceutical companies make over $8 billion a year on opioid prescriptions. Is it worse to sell heroin to the people on your block or to sell Oxycontin to the entire state of West Virginia? Who gets caught, the individual or the company? And I'm not saying that when a person does something morally wrong, it's never their responsibility, never their choice, never their fault, and no one should be held accountable. All of us can look inside of ourselves and know we've made bad choices and we've done some bad and selfish things. What I am saying is that all of us should become more attuned to our bias to believe that it's an individual's fault all the time. Fully the individual's responsibility. They shouldn't have made those choices. They should have known better. That property crimes committed by a single person are much more grievous and violent than what corporations have done to the fabric of our society. When we become aware of such biases, we become more capable of extending grace, of extending forgiveness to one another and to ourselves. If you're out of work, you're not a bad person, you are enough. If you're addicted to alcohol or drugs, you're not a bad person, you are enough. If you've made choices that you weren't proud of, but you didn't know what else to do, you're not a bad person, you are enough. Our neighbors who do the same are enough. When homeless people leave their trash behind at their camp behind your house, they're still enough. They're still enough. We're not going to get much grace and forgiveness and understanding from Walmart. I've looked, it's not there. We won't get it from Monsanto. The only place we can get it is from each other, by recognizing our biases and giving one another a break, blaming individuals less, giving each other the benefit of the doubt.